The federal government in 48 states are suing Facebook for violating antitrust laws, and they are demanding that they sell both WhatsApp and Instagram. Let's get into it. Hey, if it's your first time here, my name is Nate, the lawyer, YouTuber. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like this video, share this video, and subscribe to the channel if you like what you hear. Let's just get into it. The government alleges that Facebook holds a monopoly over the market for personal social networking services. The complaint alleges that Facebook is a monopoly. Now, what are social networking services? Social networking services are defined as services that allow users to create profiles with personal information and share things like photos, pictures, and then make connections with other profiles. Now, the three largest social network sites on the planet are Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, all owned by Facebook. Now, the government claims that Facebook has a monopoly. So first, what is a monopoly? Well, a monopoly is when one entity controls the entire market for goods and services with little to no competition. For simplicity, I've broken it down into two types: natural and unnatural monopolies. Now, natural monopolies are generally legal. Now, a natural monopoly is when a company innovates or has some superior product, like Henry Ford with building the first Model T car. He had a monopoly on cars. The first personal computer. The person who built the first personal computer had a monopoly on computers. And this could also happen by accidents, but these are called natural monopolies, innovation within a marketplace. Now, just to be clear, natural monopolies are both legal and encouraged. An unnatural monopoly is when a company generally already has a monopoly and is willfully attempting to maintain monopolistic power. And the way they do that is either by suppressing, neutralizing, acquiring, or deterring serious competitive threats within that marketplace. Now, there's generally a transition between a natural monopoly and an unnatural monopoly. For instance, like Standard Oil. Standard Oil was the first company to start with gasoline. You could only get gasoline from one company in the United States for a long time. And it became an unnatural monopoly because they started putting in practices to keep their monopolistic power. Same thing with AT&T. If you wanted to make a long distance call, you had to use AT&T. They had a natural monopoly because they were first in the game, but over time it developed into an unnatural monopoly. They were broken up. Microsoft is another example. Now, the FTC is alleging in this complaint that Facebook has crossed the line from a natural monopoly to an unnatural monopoly. Now, when you go to the Justice Department's website, it lays out the two elements that are required for a company to turn from a natural monopoly to an illegal, unnatural monopoly, and it's called monopolization. Monopolization requires two elements: monopoly power and the willful acquisition or maintenance of that power as distinguished from growth or development as a consequence of a superior product, business acumen, or historical accident. So here the government is distinguishing in this rule the difference between a natural monopoly and an unnatural monopoly. So let's evaluate the complaint and see if Facebook has turned into an unnatural monopoly which violates the U.S. code. So our first question is, does Facebook have a monopoly already? So first we'll look at earnings. So the government in this complaint alleges that Facebook makes over $70 billion in revenue and profits more than $18.5 billion a year. When you're talking about monopolies, you're really looking at market share. So let's look at Facebook's market share. Now, Facebook has unparalleled market share when it comes to personal social networking. In 2019, the U.S. had a population of 328.2 million people. The number of Facebook users in the United States in 2019 were 219.86 million. Now, according to Pew Research in 2019, among U.S. adults who actually use Facebook, 75% use Facebook at least once a day. That 9 out of 10 Americans use one of the Facebook family of products: Facebook, WhatsApp, or even Instagram. And last, about 80% of 18 to 29-year-olds use Facebook at some time. Now, it's important to note, when we're talking about social media, we're talking about YouTube, we're talking about all the social media sites. But when we're talking about personal social networking sites, that's different. That's what Facebook does. Facebook has a monopoly on personal social networking, as the government alleges, versus just social media. That's when you add the YouTubes. And if you just talk about social media, Facebook has 60% market share in social media. Now, based on the facts that you've heard, would you say that Facebook has a monopoly on personal social networking sites? So if you answered the first question in the affirmative, we now have to ask our second question. Does Facebook maintain an unnatural monopoly by either suppressing, neutralizing, acquiring, or deterring serious competitive threats? And the government points to 3 events that shows how not only Facebook kills the competition, but keeps its unnatural monopoly in place. Those 3 events are acquiring Instagram, acquiring WhatsApp, and the anti-competitive conditioning of access to the platform to suppress competition. So let's start with the first one, Instagram. Now, Instagram was a mobile-first app that allowed users to engage on personal social networking with friends, family, through talking, editing, sharing photographs, yada, yada, yada. Now, Instagram emerged at a critical time where there was a transition in the way people were using technology. Originally, to use Facebook or any other social networking site, you were using a PC, a physical computer. But as people moved from things like laptops and desktops to mobile devices, Instagram was already set up and developed so people can use it on the go, on things like tablets, on things like cell phones, where Facebook was still struggling to catch up. Now, the FTC reveals an internal email of Facebook's philosophy with competition. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg said in an email, Facebook's philosophy when it comes to competition: it's better to buy than compete. Now, after acquiring Instagram, Facebook then had another competitor step in, and that's WhatsApp. Now, WhatsApp threatened to eat a large majority of market share by exploiting Facebook's weaknesses in the mobile app arena. Now, this is from the complaint. In April 2012, Mr. Zuckerberg identified a troubling global trend of messaging apps, using messages as a springboard to build more general mobile social networks. And by October 2012, the threat was widely recognized within Facebook, with a Facebook business growth director predicting internally that this might be the biggest threat we've ever faced at the company. And Facebook went back to their philosophy: it's better to buy than to compete. So Facebook purchased WhatsApp. Now, the government alleges in the complaint that Facebook holds and operates Instagram and WhatsApp and continues to keep them positioned to provide a protective moat around its personal social networking monopoly. Now, what are the effects of this monopoly? Well, first, they say Facebook has a monopoly on personal social networking services in the United States, and advertisers essentially have no choice within the space. It's either Facebook or nothing. The government alleges that Facebook uses its systems to disadvantage competitors by manipulating access to Facebook. And then lastly, the government alleges that Facebook, by doing this, has almost a total monopoly in the space of personal social network. Now, to cure this, the government is asking that Facebook be forced to sell both Instagram and WhatsApp and allow them to directly compete with Facebook. Essentially, this will give people choices in the marketplace and allow these other companies to compete with Facebook for their advertising dollars, hopefully lowering the cost. So Facebook countered these claims by pointing to a couple of different things. So first, Facebook says, well, the FTC itself approved the deals with WhatsApp and Instagram. Why did you approve them in the first place? Second, Facebook says these deals are more than 5 years old. Facebook says the FTC and states stood by for years while Facebook invested billions of dollars and millions of hours to make Instagram and WhatsApp into the apps that billions of users enjoy today. And lastly, Facebook claims that WhatsApp and Instagram are not examples of them grabbing up competitors, but expansions in the business model. These companies were strictly mobile devices, and Facebook was expanding the business into the mobile arena. Now, I call this Facebook's Blockbuster argument. Well, for those of you who don't know, Blockbuster Video was a movie rental chain. It had physical stores, and you went and got physical movies and brought them home and popped them into the DVD or CD player or Blu-ray player.
Never seen 10,000 tapes in one store.
There's so much kid stuff.
And I can keep them for 3 evenings.
Ordinary video stores don't even come close to Blockbuster Video.
So right at the beginning of the shift from physical stores and physical CDs to online streaming, Blockbuster had a chance to acquire a new startup. That startup was Netflix for $50 million. Now, similar to Facebook, in the space of renting videos, Blockbuster pretty much had a monopoly, and they didn't expand their business to the online forum. So essentially what happened? Well, Blockbuster's out of business, and Netflix is one of the top companies on the planet. So Facebook has acknowledged itself to Blockbuster Video. They had a monopoly in the space that they were in. They saw that space was changing. People were moving more to mobile devices. So they bought apps that were on the mobile devices to expand their business. And if they didn't, they could have ended up like Blockbuster. They saw an opportunity, they took it. Most people would say Blockbuster made a mistake not buying Netflix, and Facebook is saying we weren't going to make that same mistake. We weren't going to be Blockbuster. What do you think? Do you think Facebook has an illegal monopoly? If so, who's next? Google? YouTube? Let me know in the comments below. It's interesting. When I was pitching this video to some of my friends, most people didn't even realize that Facebook even owned WhatsApp and Instagram. So let me know in the comment section how you feel. Peace.